Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Nicole Klein. I'm with the Policy Circle, and I am our Director of Expansion and External Relations. And as many of you know, I work with our state leadership councils in the states. So before I hand it over to my colleague, Judy Willard, to lead our conversation today, I wanted to share a few things that'll make our conversation today go more smoothly via Zoom. You'll notice that we are recording this conversation, so please turn off your notifications on your computer or on your phone by accessing your network preferences. You are all currently muted, so if you would like to participate during the Q&A, you'll notify me by clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. I will unmute you and call you by name so that you can ask your question of our panelists. If you've joined by phone, you can push *9 and to activate the raise hand feature. You may also submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the viewing screen, and I'll ask your question for you if that's better. I will now introduce my colleague, Judy Willard. Judy is our Circle Membership Director at the Policy Circle. Many of you already know Judy, have interacted with Judy. She is really your first point of contact when starting your circle, and she can help you maximize the resources that are available to you through the Policy Circle. She likes to say that she's your biggest cheerleader, and she truly is on the Policy Circle team. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Judy Willard.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special programming just for our circle leaders. And if you don't know, this is actually a continuation of a conversation we started at our summit in Chicago in 2019 of how to effectively, interact with the elected officials. So I hope that you all got to watch the video that we made at the summit. If not, we will have it in our recap email. Plus, you can always see it on the website. So I'm really excited to introduce to you Morgan Perrill and Jillian Bernas. They are both circle leaders, and you can read their bio in the chat box because I want to save precious time for the meat of the conversation. But I'll give you a quick rundown. Morgan, give them a little wave. Morgan is the statewide co-chair for the Indiana State Leadership Council for the Policy Circle. And like I said, she is also a circle leader for the Empower Our Circle. In her day job, she is the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Corydon Group and currently serves on the Board of Governors. She also serves as the district chair for her local party and on several local community advisory boards. She lives in Hendricks County in Danville, Indiana. We have a Danville, Illinois, so I get those mixed up. Yeah. And she has a husband, Brett, and 2 children, Bryant and Asher, and the only girl in the house is Ginger, her golden retriever, so I'm so sorry. So Jillian, give them a wave, Jillian. Jillian is a member of the Illinois State Leadership Council and a circle leader of the Schaumburg Circle. She currently drives the external affairs strategy at Valdez Engineering Company. She is bilingual and teaches English to Spanish learners at her church. Jillian serves as a trustee on the Schaumburg Township District Library Board, where she lives with her husband, Angel, and daughter, Patricia. These women are both great examples of serving on the local level, and we at the Policy Circle really believe that that's where we can have the most impact. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. Morgan, my first question is going to go to you, and Jillian, if you want to follow up with anything more when she's done, great. If you want to pass, just say pass. Morgan, oftentimes we get caught up with the tactics of how to contact a lawmaker, or we're just so upset that we have to contact them right now. And but you have some recommendations for some pre-work that needs to be done. Can you give us those points?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So I think before anybody reaches out to their lawmaker, they should really think about really taking 4 steps. So, and some of you this comes natural to you and you may not even think to do it, but some of you may need to do some background work before you get started. And I think I kind of have broken it down into 4 steps. And the first one is really finding what you're passionate about and what you're knowledgeable about. So if you really want to get involved, you really should know where you want to get involved. And it kind of helps you communicate a message that's authentic. And I think that that's really important when you're trying to get involved in an area. So if you don't know, take some time and do some self-discovery. If you're a circle leader and your group maybe struggles in this area, it might be a good topic for you with your circle. There are a lot of resources and self-discovery I think you can use. And then once you know that, where you want to get involved, what you want to communicate on, I think you can take step 2, which is, I think, probably the most important that people skip over, which is really understanding how your government operates. You want to make sure that you research where to get involved. In my experience, I think the closer you are to your government, the more impact it has on your daily life. And I think the less people understand how that level of government operates. And that goes for, I work in a public affairs firm, and I would say even the people around me, I think, have less experience on the local level of government and understand it less on a daily basis. So I think it's important that you really research and understand it. And so that would be step 2. I think step 3 is really to research the key and find out about the key contacts in that area. And this kind of goes along with step 2. But step 3 is really, you don't want to waste your message on the wrong people. So if you want to affect change on your local school, for example, you want to encourage them to or not to go back full time in the fall, wherever you stand on the issue. You don't want to email your congressman necessarily, because they're not going to have the impact on your local school. And you wouldn't want to email your superintendent, at least in our case here in Indiana, and say something about not electing him in the fall. But you would want to email your local school board, because we elect our local school board. But if you don't know that, you're going to waste your message on the wrong person. So I think it's important to know who, it's important to know where, and it's important to know what you care about the most. And then lastly, once you know who and where and what you're passionate about, you also need to know about them so that you can start to build those relationships. So make connections, build relationships, find out what you have in common so that you can make a connection when you reach out to them. So that's what I would recommend. I think is some of the pre-work that you should do before you reach out. And I think that will make your communication be more impactful. And we all know that time is our greatest asset and valuable resource. So I think that will make the most of your time and theirs as elected officials. So that's what I would recommend.
Jillian, do you have anything to add to that?
I especially appreciate Morgan bringing up identifying who to talk to. I know in our state in Illinois, there's so many bodies of government, and we often get constituents that come to us who are trying to work through a problem that has nothing to do with my particular branch of government, which is our body of government, which is the library board. And it just causes a lot of frustration for that constituent because they feel like they can't get their message across because they can't identify who they need to talk to. So often, like if you get your property tax bill, you can see all the different bodies of government that you're a constituent of, and so you can identify maybe which might have the most to do with the issue you're concerned about. You also might just want to ask first, like, are you the right person to present this information to, or should I go elsewhere? Because that can lower the frustration. And I think often patrons can get really frustrated that the library isn't the right government to talk to about their concerns. And also to remember that trustees, they're representatives of the community on your local boards. And so they typically only hire and fire one person, and that's probably the executive director of the library, or in the case of a village government, maybe like the administrator, or the, probably administrator would be the title. But they also oversee policy and they pass the budget. So they aren't necessarily hiring and firing that person you interact with at the counter. So remember that too, that they might not have control over the issue you have, but they might be able to help you find a solution.
But it's different in Indiana, so you got to be careful. So as far as policy circle topics, would be a great person to bring in is a representative from your local government to explain the various layers of government, especially in your local areas, to explain who's the executive body, who's your legislative body on the local area, and how it all functions together, because I think that is very confusing for a lot of people. So I think that'd be a great topic for a policy circle, especially Zoom, because it'd be easier for them to accomplish that maybe this time. So.
There you go. And that's why you two are such great, why you're on the State Leadership Council, because you have great ideas for other circle leaders. I love that. Let's talk about the myth that lawmakers at all levels of government are actually smarter than all of us. Is that true? I think I know the answer to that, but explain how important it is that they do hear from their constituents. Morgan, you first.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, lawmakers are people. I know that that's obvious, right? But I think when we're in this day and age where people just email or shoot off messages on social media, it's easy to forget that a lawmaker is just like you and me. They kind of become celebrities or whatnot. I spent 12 years working for the Speaker of the House in Indiana and handled a lot of the constituent communication. So I saw a lot of things come in, and I think people forget that they're people just like you and me, and they can only be in so many places, know so many things, and respond to so many inquiries. And so I think that makes constituent engagement so much more important, because if we don't tell them what's important to us as their constituents, they don't know. And the one thing that I will say, that it's not just the negative stuff, but it's the positive stuff too. I think, change, I think, comes from, you only hear the negative stuff, but I think change can be just as impacted by positive feedback as well. If someone's not telling you that you're doing the right thing, then you're not necessarily motivated to continue to do the right thing. So I would say that both sides of the feedback is very important.
Jillian, what do you say about that? How important is it for us to be, reaching out to them?
Well, I think it definitely is a huge myth that a trustee or a local official or even a state rep or state senator are smarter than anyone listening to this call. I actually ran for my current position, and then I went on to also run for state rep. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful in my try, but it came from the realization that I have a lot to offer. And I am smart, if not in some instances smarter than people who are right now managing government and its resources. And so I think especially women, they often think that, oh, I don't have expertise in this area, so I don't have anything to contribute. Or, oh, well, I can't participate because I made the decision to stay home and stay with my children. And so I really haven't been developing my business acumen. And so how can I possibly contribute? And I think that's really false. There's a lot of, especially women, that have a lot to contribute to the conversation. They're the people enrolling their children in schools. They're the people who are probably maybe managing the family's budget, and so they know what they pay in taxes. And we often need people as a trustee. We need people to tell us, how are these very specific procedures in our governing body working? Like, how do you sign up for a card? Is it easy for your child to access resources in our library? And we want to know about it. And so I think that it's a complete myth that these are really smart people who know what you need in your families. You need to realize that they're just people, and we're looking for experts to rely on for information.
That's great. And I liken it to the fact that they're not smarter than us. They do rely on us to find our passion, because we will educate ourselves on issues and then be able to educate them, which is what's so cool, obviously, about the policy circle, because we've got all that information to, for women to find their passion, because they read the briefs and they, find their passion. So, let's say we've done the pre-work, right? We've done our research. We found out what we're passionate about. We know what it is we kind of want to say, but how do we communicate with them? What's the best avenue? Should I stalk them on social media? Like, what's the best way to interact, and what are some things that we need to be mindful of? Jillian, I'll call on you first.
Of course. Well, I can give a good example of a good communication and an example of a bad communication, if that would be helpful. I know that we had a program at the library, and it was reading to a dog. So it was helping children learn how to read by giving them a very low stress environment to do so. And it wasn't, we were having some challenges with programming. And so it was what seemed to the patrons to be canceled. But it was in fact something that just needed to be worked out behind the scenes. And sometimes too, decisions are made and patrons see maybe, or constituents see the public face of that, but they're not seeing what's happening behind the scenes. So a wonderful couple, they came first, they wrote to us. They presented the case in a very, very nice way. They wrote to all the trustees. They let us know that they would be coming to our next meeting. So all of our meetings are open to the public. Anyone can come. You don't necessarily have to tell us you're coming, but that's nice to let us know that you are coming and that you want to discuss a certain topic. Public has about, we typically don't limit it, but about 5 minutes to talk about what the issue is they want to present. And so this couple did come talk to us, and we didn't even know about this program being canceled. So then we were able to work with the leadership in the library to see what was wrong and to bring them a solution. And we did in fact reinstate the program. It just needed to be reorganized and a new point people assigned to it. And so if you're able to, I clearly identified who to come talk to. They wrote to us ahead of time. They said they would be coming to our meeting. They prepared a presentation for us to tell us why this was an important resource. And we were able to get them the information they need and resolve the situation. On the other hand, there's people that often come to us straight out of the gate. They're very aggressive. And so they might write a strongly worded email. And then we ask them to come to the meeting and invite them to come present their point of view to all of us, and they don't come. We present them information about why what happened, and it's just met with more aggression. And oftentimes, those situations just automatically, it makes it really hard for the trustees to find out how to solve this person's problem or give them the information they need to understand what's happening. And so that can often be, I can't speak to specifics because we actually have a couple situations that ended really badly and current legal proceedings are happening because of them. So we just never want to see it rise to that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Morgan, what can you tell us about, keeping in mind when communicating and timing of communication and how we communicate with the lawmakers?
Yeah, I mean, those are some great examples. I think, to avoid some of those things, I think, just keeping in mind that you're trying to build a relationship with the lawmaker and that the ultimate goal is to affect change, right? So, and if you want to be a long-term resource for that individual going forward, I think is always a good thing. So, just remembering to be polite. I've trained a lot of people in this industry, and I think, a lot of times I always use this phrase, you catch more bees with honey than vinegar. I always think that's the case because you never know who's going to come around again. Politics is a very small world. And so you never know who you're going to be relying on in the future. And so I think it's always important to build a relationship. So, I think it's always important to be polite and appropriate. And so that's always important. I think when you're trying to affect change or I keep using that word, I don't know, but influence somebody, you might want to think about including stories. Storytelling is always very effective, and including stats, because you're going to catch both sides of the personality, right? The feeling side and the thinking personality. So if you don't know the person, if you include both, you'll probably catch whichever personality type they are, right? If you know them, like if you're communicating with me, I'm more of a feeling person, so I'm going to react to your story. But if you don't know me, if you include both, then you'll get both sides. So I think stats and stories are always good to include in your communication. I think that's a very effective motivator for people in your communication. I think timing is very, very, very important. Timing and sending it again. If they had sent the letter after the meeting, none of that would have happened in the situation that was described. So I think it's very important to know, and again, who to communicate and where, but you have to send it at the right time. I know the state General Assembly here in Indiana, we have a great website resource where you can watch all the hearings online. You can track the bills. In fact, they'll track them for you. You can just pick a bill and star it, and it'll send you emails when there's changes. So you can follow it through the process. So they make it actually very easy. So if there's a vote coming up, you'd want to make sure to email the legislator ahead of time. Excuse me. So you want to make sure that you're timing your emails appropriately so that action can be taken appropriately. And again, when you're communicating face-to-face is always best. I think in the pre-video, there's some really good information about this. So if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to do that. But it's important to remember that, again, that these are people, and time is our most valuable resource. I will say that the more local, the more FaceTime, more local the office, the more FaceTime you're likely to get. But just don't give up. Keep submitting your requests for a face-to-face meeting. But just remember that they're very busy people, and that, it may not always happen when you need it right away. But just remember you're building a relationship, and that, there are other avenues, and you should try to use all of them: email, letter, calls, social media as well. So, and finally, it's probably best not to accost them if you see them in a grocery store. Again, they're people, they have families just like you and I do, unless they give you permission. I did have a state rep tell me once that I could talk to him about, I could lobby him at the church, which was quite rare. In fact, he told me to, because he'd rather me do that than call him on Monday. He's a pretty unique guy. So I
thought you'd be nice to him at church, right? Like, you're not going to yell at somebody when you're at church.
I know, I'd never yell at him anyway, but still, he's like, no, you should talk to me at church, because then we don't have to talk on Monday morning. It'll be great. And I was like, okay.
Okay. That's awesome.
But yeah, so that's I think that's sort of the advice that I try to live by when I'm communicating with elected officials.
Thank you. We actually have a special guest that just jumped on our call. I have a question for her. This is Rep. Amy Grant. Hi, Amy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So we are going to pepper you with what is the best way to engage you? Like, if you want a constituent to engage you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, in my office before COVID, I would regularly have coffees. And you could come into my office and have coffee, but not everyone can do that. And I would sit down with people, and they would come in and out, and we would stagger them. If you can't come and you're working, you can call my office, and I would call you back. Now with COVID, that's been very, very difficult. There are so many people, and some people aren't even in my district. Your district manager fields your calls, and sometimes you don't even know what's going on. I mean, you don't know if you're not constantly looking at your email. But if you get, like during COVID, I would get hundreds of telephone calls. And so my director, especially about Illinois Department of Employment Services, and so I didn't know what was going on. But I'm willing to even give out my cell phone number. So we're not that important. I like what Jillian had to say. We're not all that smart. You would be surprised.
Oh my gosh. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us, Amy. And we're at that point of the programming where we will open it up to Q&A very soon, but we are at that point in programming where we show our circle members a tool or resource that we have created for them to make themselves and their members impactful. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Klein, who is, as you know from the beginning of the call, she is the Director of Expansion and External Relations for the Policy Circle, and she works tirelessly to promote this roundtable discussion model. And she is responsible for policy engagement, the strategies among our members, and our programming across the organization. So if you are a circle leader out there who has expertise in XYZ, and you saw that we have written a policy brief on XYZ, you need to contact Nicole, because pretty soon you'll be sitting where Morgan and Jillian are. That's how we do this. So we've got some great women in our network, and we want to highlight you and all the things that you know. So prior to joining the Policy Circle, Nicole was Public Affairs Manager at the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, where she worked with Connecticut's leading companies to influence the legislative process, including the formation of the Adopt a Legislator program. Plus, she has a super cool food blog called Seasonally Creation, so you all need to check that out too. So Nicole, I want to hand it over to you right now. Gotta unmute her.
And thanks for the plug there. Appreciate it. So yeah, what we wanted to do is set aside a little bit of time to actually show you a tool that you can use in actually taking action based on the information that you're hearing from our panelists today. And before I actually bring on, we have a special guest who has done some of her homework based on what Morgan and Jillian and Representative Grant have shared. I just want to show you where to find this tool. So I'm going to actually show my screen to you here. And let's see. So you should be able to see that. And so right now I'm on the Policy Circle homepage, and hopefully you all can see that. Maybe my panelists can give me a head nod that this is working. Okay, perfect, thank you. So where you can find this template, we have a lot of different templates and tools at the Policy Circle. So if you go to thepolicycircle.org, you will be prompted to either log in, or if you're already logged in, you can go to My Circle. So when I click on that, you will see I am now on the inside of our membership portal. This is where you're going to find most of your Policy Circle tools and resources. And we're not going to go through all of that today. You could always schedule time with Judy to, explore this platform. But this tool that we're talking about today, how to contact your lawmakers, you're actually going to go over here to the blue sidebar and click on Virtual Resources. We've compiled a lot of different ways for you to engage during this time in this pandemic and other crises that are happening around the country. So if you scroll down to Tools to Speak Up, you'll find there's a way to how do I write a letter to the editor? That's a future program. And then today we're actually going to look at this template on how to contact lawmakers. So I actually have it pulled up already here. And this is a template, as Judy mentioned. I've done a lot of work in influencing policy, working with other constituents, primarily from the business community. And so this template is not just something that we came up with, like, hey, this sounds like a great idea. It's actually informed by experience that it actually works. So I'd like to bring on screen here Jamie Locke. Hi, Jamie. Jamie is a circle leader in Indiana. Hello, hello. And Jamie, I'd love for you to, I've invited Jamie on to just kind of share her experience in being part of the Policy Circle. And also Jamie has taken this template and she drafted a letter. So we're actually going to take a look at that letter. But Jamie, I kind of want to give you the floor just to share a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved with the Policy Circle, and then we'll dive into your letter.
All right, thank you. My name is Jamie Locke, and really I got introduced to the Policy Circle through a friend. They were at kind of the launching party in our area, and she asked if I would consider being a co-leader with her. And so there's actually 3 of us that we kind of tag team, and we've just been slowly growing it. The first year was a learning year, and now we feel like we're kind of getting some traction. And really, I have 4 children. My day job, I'm executive director of a dental society locally, and yeah, So that's about me.
Excellent, excellent. So Jamie, you took this template and you created a letter. I'm actually going to click over to the finished letter so you all can see kind of what it looks like and what Jamie put into it. We're actually going to go through pieces of this letter. So Jamie, tell us what, you have like the meat of what you're trying to accomplish here. You've done an excellent job. So tell the audience, like, what is the outcome that you're looking for in sending this letter, or sending out this communication?
Absolutely. Well, and I'll just kind of say first, the topic of this particular letter, it was actually spurred on, during schools being shut down, everybody was dealing with e-learning. And I think on Facebook, I just kind of posted a friendly, like, hey, totally feel for those teachers out there. This is not working for my kids either, sort of type post. And I was a little surprised about the overwhelming response and affirmation that everybody was struggling with it. And the state of Indiana, I think that the state director of education, she recently, actually I think just a few days ago, posted, each school district is going to, well, they have submitted some guidelines for the fall. Each school district is individually going to kind of look at it. And so with that, I was invited to speak on an e-learning panel discussion. And so that kind of spurred this on. There's some people running for school board that I think kind of recognized that the perception was that parents weren't being listened to. And so that was kind of the purpose of the e-learning, to give a forum for some constructive feedback.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. And I think, we'll get into the meat of your letter here, but you've identified, as Morgan had mentioned, kind of doing your homework, identifying, who are the people I need to communicate with. In some cases, it may not be appropriate to communicate with a superintendent. In this case, I think it's definitely appropriate if you actually have a couple of different people here who you want to make sure see this letter. So you've introduced, this first paragraph here, if you kind of go back to this template, right, is introducing yourself. And I know it seems simple, but, we all have multiple identities. We're moms, we're wives, we're professionals, we might be homemakers, we're policy circle leaders, right? So it's really understanding, okay, what is the identity that is going to most resonate with this particular audience? So Jamie, maybe you want to talk about like how you've identified yourself here with, with your audience, like why you chose this particular way to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so, as I mentioned prior, I have 4 children. However, my oldest is in college. And so, just to kind of keep it simple, I felt, I have 3 students who are currently enrolled in this school district. Also, I liked how Morgan discussed how, our leaders are real people. Initially, I was a little hesitant just because I do not have, an educator's background or anything like that, but I do. I have children who are in the school system. I at one time was a student, so sometimes I think finding where there's common ground, I think that kind of, yes, I'm not a teacher, but you know what, I have 3 students who are impacted by any decision that the school board makes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes back to the storytelling piece too, of like, here's my experience and here's what I'm working with. The second part of this letter is really, try to, and Morgan said it really well. You get more bees with honey than vinegar. I always mess up that quote. So thank you for reiterating that, Morgan. But just kind of, you don't have to agree with the people you're communicating with or you're trying to influence, but, just kind of acknowledging the position that they're in today, especially with like the COVID-19, the pandemic, really just saying, hey, thanks for being in public service. I appreciate that. That's really going to get somebody's attention, because I can almost guarantee to you that most of the letters they get are saying, here's who I am and here's what you're doing wrong, or here's who I am and here's what I would like for you to change. So really kind of building on some levels of positivity will go a long way. So this part is really, Jamie kept it in place, and I would recommend that for people to kind of just keep that there. And then right in the middle is kind of the meat of what Jamie is trying to communicate. And I'm just going to toggle back to the letter here so you can kind of see what that looks like, right? We want you to, you want to say something about, okay, here's what I'm specifically concerned about, right? Maybe it's a budget issue. In this case, it's e-learning. And here's why I am concerned about that. So it's really kind of framing in that way. So Jamie, you did a great job of building upon that. I don't know if you want to kind of comment on the specifics here. And, you know, we're going to share this template so everybody has access to it in the recap. But Jamie, if you wanted to add anything there before I move on to the next section.
Sure, just kind of playing on, you know, how Morgan indicated, like being polite. I think, you know, our knee-jerk reaction is like, oh my gosh, they messed everything up. And I have that sentence in there, while no one could have anticipated such a long-term shutdown of schools, I feel this is an opportunity to discover what we could do better as we move forward. So I think, you know, acknowledgement of what didn't work well without land blasting them and without saying, why did you, you know, just being hypercritical of a decision that we can all, I think, agree on that nobody anticipated this and they were doing the best what they could with the resources they had at the time. And so, you know, opening that door without being discouraging, I felt was important.
That's great. Yeah, I think you did a really good job of adding that in. And so that's kind of where you're, you know, why you're contacting the lawmakers, really going to be this section. And then your next section, again, going back to building on those levels and those layers of positivity, offering some level of support, right? Like, hey, I'm here to help you. I'd be more than interested in talking with you about how we can work together to solve this particular issue is something that I encourage you to kind of leave in there in that template. And then the other, this is also something that's totally up to you. Jamie's going to be on a panel, but maybe you want to consider inviting the lawmaker or the person you're contacting to engage with you in some way. Maybe it's inviting them to a policy circle discussion or a policy circle Zoom meeting. Jamie, you're actually inviting them to a panel discussion. So hoping to maybe get that face-to-face, right? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Right, yes. Yeah.
Awesome. And then just the conclusion of the letter is really just, again, saying thank you. You know, thank you for serving our district and the state of Indiana. So you're just saying, like, I appreciate what you're doing, and it's not for everybody. This is super important, and it gets overlooked all the time, but including your contact information and including that it include your address. So a lot of times lawmakers are going to look and see, okay, is this even a constituent, right? So you want to make sure that you have that there. You could say I live in this town, but as many of us know, there's multiple districts in certain towns and cities. So, so Jamie, thank you so much for developing this letter, and please keep us all posted on the reaction that you get. Super excited that you put this together and really showing all of our circle leaders like how it can be done and how it can be used. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to my colleague, Judy Willard, who we're going to actually open it up to Q&A for our panelists. So if you have, now's the time. I have not seen questions come in yet, but if you have some questions for our panelists about how to interact or best practices, or maybe you've had you know, an experience that you want to share, you know, let us know in the chat line or in the Q&A.
Yeah, I've got to unmute myself. Yeah, I wanted to ask before, just put your questions in the Q&A or use the raise hand feature, and Nicole will call on you. But while we wait, I wanted to ask one question of all of our panelists, Morgan, Jillian, and Rep. Amy Grant. Do you have examples of a really bad interaction and an example of a really good interaction? Because I was homeowner association president of 414 households, and I've got some bad interaction stories, and that wasn't even a paid position, but it was elected. So Morgan, you start. Do you have any that would you know, be examples of bad and good?
So I worked for the House of Representatives for a while and managed all of the staff and all of the legislators' staff who handled we're set up differently, but I managed the staff who worked for all of the legislators in the caucus. And we send out surveys to all of the constituents, and you know, it's one of those things where they send them back, and the constituents sometimes forget that they're sending them to actual people and that they get read. And you know, occasionally they come back and they're pretty nasty. Some of them are very nice, and the feedback's great. One had come back, and then the person had then gone and sent another email following up, and they had sent some pretty nasty things. And then some pretty nasty things about the representative and his family and his son in particular. And it was very disparaging comments, very personal. It was inappropriate. And, you know, their name and address is on all of these things. So the state rep went and knocked on their door, showed up at their house, and didn't do anything inappropriate, but just said, you know, we read the emails that come in and the letters that you sent. And the constituent was shocked, needless to say. He came back and reported to us the next day. Of course, he told me that he was going to do this beforehand because I was a nervous wreck that this was going to go badly. It was, you know, I think the constituent ended up apologizing profusely for what he had said, and rightly should have. I mean, it was inappropriate what he said. But, you know, and he said, I just didn't think that you read the things that were sent in. So I think it just proves that you should remember that people actually do read what comes in. I know they do sometimes get a lot of communication, but needless to say, he was shocked to see the representative show up at his door. So
For sure, I would be. Jillian, do you have any that went really well or really bad?
I do. So I had shared one before that went well with the dogs in the reading program. And as a trustee, I really look for people who can help me also make decisions. So if you're an expert or if you're a constituent that's passionate about something and knows a lot about an issue, like contact me ahead of time. And then maybe when something comes up, I'll reach out to you when I need help with something. But oftentimes we only get contacted with negative issues. And so often it's from a very aggressive point or stance. And I think that some things you shouldn't do. So if someone like State Representative Amy Grant gives you her cell phone number and asks you to contact her that way, don't leave a threatening voicemail. Don't call multiple times and try to get that lawmaker's attention. They've given you, they're trusting you to handle that information in a good way and use it correctly in a very adult way. So we've had circumstances where that's happened, or they want to talk about every single issue, and so they contact you and there's an email with 10 different things with 10 different links and videos. And sometimes it's better just to be right to the point. So tell me one issue, let's discuss it. If you have multiple things to talk about, let's break it down, or let's have a meeting or come to our meetings to discuss it with us. And so I think that some of the negative experiences have been just, they inundate you with issues and then they also threaten. And that can be often just a really bad situation.
Yeah, I agree.
We do have a question from a circle leader about what is the best place to find out who to write to? Is it, you know, is it Ballotpedia? Is it like where?
I have an answer for that.
Okay.
So I know it with the state of Illinois, if you go and you put in your address at the Board of Elections, they give you a list of who your lawmakers are, all the way down to your smallest governing body. So you'll even find me, if you're in my township district, you'll see me as your library trustee along with the other library trustees. So then you know who you can write to and it has our information too. So that's a good way to start.
Excellent, excellent.
Are there any other questions in the Q&A, Nicole?
No, I'm not seeing any other questions, and we're at time anyway.
Time. I'm going to launch a poll, ladies, as we finish up. If you could take a look at that, that would be great. Again, if you weren't able to watch the video that started this conversation from our summit, it's on our website. We will put it in the recap email along with the template for the letter that we demonstrated. And, you know, the Policy Circle realizes that this is a very unique time in history, and we each have choices to make in front of us, and our wish is that we all choose kindness and joy, and think about reaching out to people and inviting them into your circle that maybe would be outside your normal scope of people. So just be thinking outside the box so that we can start conversations with all sorts of people, because this is about starting conversations, and now more than ever, that's super, super important. So Nicole, do you have any final remarks you'd like to tell the ladies?
No, I do want to just invite Representative Grant again to the conversation here, because I think you have something that you want to make sure that you share with our circle leaders.
Yes, this wasn't mentioned, and that's the reason I thought, and I found this out just by trial and error. No one taught me it, but I had a women's town hall in my town of Wheaton, Illinois, and it was open to everyone. And I had Republican women in the town hall meeting, and then I had not so much Republican women in my town hall. And at one point, it got to be a little confrontational with a few women. And as a state representative, and of course, always wanting to be polite and kind, and I do know that, you know, I do need to get votes. I don't pander to people, but I'm not going to outright fight with them. I let it go on. I sort of like let these offensive women continually yell out when they weren't called on, and I just nodded my head and was quiet. But you know what happened, and this has happened numerous times since this, is that you get the people who don't agree with those people, and or who are basically saying, hey, listen, you've talked out too much now. You've been taking up all of the time. It's time for you to be quiet. So I didn't even have to do it. There was someone else in the audience that did it for me. And oftentimes that will happen. It's happened in my coffees. And all of a sudden I'm like, this librarian comes in and she says, I think all these books should be free to these kids who go to COD, which is the College of DuPage. It's a community college. And someone who was also having coffee looked at the person and said, well, where are we going to get the money for that? You know, it's just, so you can rely on other people to help you when you're in a difficult situation. And sometimes you don't have other people there. I mean, as a state representative or a trustee, I mean, you're not going to outright fight with people because it really won't get you anywhere. So that's just my story.
I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
All right, ladies, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and keep up the good work of starting the conversations. Let's circle up. All right, thanks, ladies. Good.